Welcome to another episode of Sacred Reviews, and in this episode I'll be taking a look at Immortal Grand Prix, or IGPX, the video game, that was released for the PS2 on September 12, 2006. And while this game is a licensed title, I'll openly admit that I was never truly a fan of the anime series itself. The concept of combining fighting mechs and racing while a stroke of genius wasn't particularly appealing to me, to be honest. I'm the kind of person who wonders how people can watch something like NASCAR for hours on end. And having a show based around racing was an insurmountable problem for my enjoyment. But I guess this does leave one semi-interesting question. If I didn't care for the show, why did I purchase a game based on the show? Well, the answer to that is rather simple. The game was rather cheap, and I tend to be a man that prefers quantity over quality at times. Though even amongst the cheap titles in the bargain bin, there can be a few hidden gems. Is IGPX among those titles? The IGPX video game doesn't have much of a story at all, to be honest. You're basically given the barest bones of plot, which is to rise through the ranks of the lower leagues and become a champion of the IG1. And that is all the game really ever gives you. Sure, the game does offer a few hints at some of the plot points of the anime, but if you enter this game completely unfamiliar with those elements, they amount to little more than a nod to the source material.
Oh, 6 machines are off like a shot!
Takashi, if you love me, don't hold back when you fight me.
Fontaine, listen. I'm gonna give you a run for your money.
Takashi!
And even then, the game tends to play a bit loose by ignoring other facets of the show, like certain powerful abilities from the show being banned from use in the actual competition. Gameplay-wise, the game has one of the largest control layouts I've seen in a PS2 game, while having some of the most simplistic action, and I'm not sure if that should be a compliment or an insult, to be honest. Almost every button on the controller serves some function during the races, but only the most basic of elements is ever really utilized, and some options are almost entirely superfluous. One example of this needlessly complex layout issues is the directions on the D-pad control your teammates' tactics during a race, but there are only two tactics that are ever worth using in this game, basically. The first tactic that you'll get the most use out of is Crossfire, which makes your teammates focus on the opposing racer with the least amount of health. The other tactic is to defend, which is what you expect from the title. You simply put up your guard and work towards winning the race based on your score from placing, instead of on beating your opponent into a bloody pulp. And the only reason to defend has any use at all is because certain teams have abilities so powerful they are pretty much broken. Another issue that plagues the game despite utilizing every button but L3 in its layout is that there are no real acceleration or brake controls. While you can influence your speed to a small extent by utilizing the boost button, the majority of your pacing is dictated by the game itself, which is frustrating for two reasons. The first reason that this can prevent you from slowing down in order to match pace with an opposing team if you manage to send all of their members flying at around the same time, which means you can create a short gap in which the only thing to do is watch the track go flying by beneath your mech. The second reason that this is more annoying is that it can make dodging certain attacks near impossible, since you'll be forced to get in close even if you don't want to at times. And to continue the downward trend, the game has rather extensive loading times, which are only increased if you consider the fact that before every race the game includes a panning shot around both teams at the start line and a short before race cutscene. Because of this, you'll usually need to wait in excess of 30 seconds after selecting a race to actually start it, which is just over the top when you consider the fact that each race is only around 3 to 4 minutes long in total. On a more positive note, the game does allow you to purchase various parts of the garage, which are unlocked by winning certain races, and those parts you equip can drastically change your appearance or combat abilities. Since certain arms and leg parts come with special abilities such as being able to auto-block incoming attacks, or being able to temporarily daze an opponent with a blinding flash. Your choice on parts can drastically improve or undermine your ability to win races, but I do find it a bit annoying that you can only gain access to the best parts by taking part in races that are unlocked in the post-game content. Though to reverse my usual trend of ending on a positive note, I like to end on a few more negative notes for a change, and admit that the combat in this game is rather monotonous. You'll usually just spend the entire race either smashing away on the X button, or for some spice, you'll grab an opponent with the circle button and grind them against a track for a short while by pushing the circle button again. And one final downside in my opinion is that certain tracks feature hazards, where it's possible for the player to fall out of bounds and be forced to instantly retire. And these pits can easily wipe out an entire team if you get lucky or unlucky depending on which players manage to fall out of bounds. But usually these falls will be to the advantage of your opponent, and can leave you stuck in a 3-on-1 situation. Thankfully, it is possible to score a draw in this game, even in that situation, since the first player to cross the finish line is given 15 points, which is the same amount that the AI will score for taking 2nd, 3rd, and 4th place respectively. This also means it's possible for the player to win such a race if they manage to take out at least one opposing player before crossing the finish line. Broadly speaking, the game is underwhelming to say the least. You'd think with the long load times, the races would be visually impressive, but instead they are rather mundane and with such similar backgrounds at times that you can sometimes race on multiple tracks, yet feel like you've only competed on a single racetrack. In terms of sound, the game feels equally uninspired, to be honest. The game only possesses a few tracks, and each of them serves a specific purpose, such as the race song, the main menu song, the race selection song, and so on. Because of this, you can probably count the entire soundtrack using just your fingers, and it'd probably have a few digits left over. And while the game does have a few voice clips from the anime, the problem is that they are simply that most of the time. As such, the game is highly limited in how mood-affecting those selections are, and often fails to invoke anything beyond annoyance. This is especially true if you repeat races, since the game doesn't have much variety in terms of clips. In fact, every time you run a simulation or to earn more money, the game drops the same series of lines in the so-called before-race cutscene.
Don't drop your guard just because it's a simulation.
Hell yes, I'd advise you to fight like it's race day.
Let's keep an eye on our formation, okay?
Thankfully, you can turn off the voice of the announcer and the before racing cutscenes in the options menu, but this does nothing for the short clips that pop up every time you enter the main menu.
Confucius says, the will is the master of the spirit.
IGPX is a bit of a mixed bag, to be honest. The downsides are numerous and unavoidable, but considering the game is a licensed title, it is sort of expected for it to be on the lower end in terms of quality. But just because this game meets expectations, doesn't mean it's worth playing. If you're a fan of the anime, you'd probably be disappointed with the lack of loyalty to the source material, and if you're a fan of racing or fighting games, you'd be disappointed by the game's overall lack of quality in those areas. The racing is underwhelming since most races will be determined by combat rather than finishing, and the combat is unappealing since it's overly simplistic, which I guess leaves my overall opinion rather obvious. Don't play this game.